Good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started. We've started the live streaming as well. So I'd like to welcome you all to West Offices to this decision-making session for the Executive Member for Economy and Transport. And you may well have noticed that I am not the Executive Member for Economy and Transport. I'm Councillor Claire Douglas, the leader of the Council. Councillor Kilbane isn't here due to the fact that he has a conflict of interest because he has a parking permit in the residents' parking zone that we're talking about today. So hence I'm doing the session and making the decision today. So if we go to the agenda, and just for everybody's notice as well, I have my agenda on my computer, so that's why I'm looking at the laptop rather than at a piece of paper. So declarations of interest, I have none, so we can move on from that. The minutes are agenda item 2, and that would usually we would look at that as well, but Councillor Kilbane was the person that held that meeting in September, and so we're going to defer those minutes so that he can review them when he takes the next decision making session. Our next section is item agenda number 3, public participation. And we have today 5 people who are going to speak to us, and we've also had 2 written representations. So I've read the written representations, but everybody who's going to speak today gets 3 minutes. And it's rather a shame that you're so far down that end of the room and I'm right up here, but I can hear you, as I'm sure you can hear me as well. And when you come to the microphone, you'll see that there's a mic button. You just press that, and then your comments will also go onto the live stream as well. If the mic's not on, then the public won't be able to hear you. So the first person we have on the list is Mr. Peter Chilman. So would you like to come to the mic, take a seat? You have 3 minutes. I can give you a 30-second warning if you'd like me to, or if you're confident that you will speak for 3 minutes, I can leave you to it. Okay, off you go then. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Douglas, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Peter Chilman, and I live in Queen Street. I object to this traffic regulation order as, if enacted, it will effectively remove vehicular access to my house. The restrictions will severely affect my ability to use my car, to receive deliveries, and to engage tradespeople to work on my house. It will make life effectively untenable for those with mobility problems, for those who require regular visits from carers, and for those who need to get children safely in and out of vehicles. A house with restricted vehicular access is not an attractive proposition as a permanent home. It's therefore highly likely that Queen Street will change from a small, vibrant community of long-term residents into a strip of short-term holiday lettings, thus further reducing the stock of affordable family residences in central York. As this project has progressed, it's become increasingly clear that residents are very much on the lowest rung of the stakeholder ladder. The Railway Institute and LNER have kept their parking spaces. The York Cycle Campaign have got their dedicated cycleway. Access is uninterrupted to the Premier Inn. The bus stop and the taxi rank are retained. The residents get nothing. We residents of Queen Street are the only people whose homes, whose health, whose well-being and quality of life are directly affected by this development. After years of uncertainty and planning blight, we are now required to live for 55 weeks in a construction site. And at the end of this period, we will effectively have been moved from a quiet side street onto a 5-lane main road with no parking. I urge you to withdraw this highly damaging traffic regulation order and work constructively with residents to accommodate our needs. I'm sure that with pragmatism, common sense and goodwill, we can create a new Queen Street that truly works for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chilman, and I will take your points and your concerns into consideration when I make the decision. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas.
The next person we have on the list is Anna Semlin. If you'd like to come to the mic, Anna. Thank you. So 3 minutes. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm Anna Semlin. I'm former Labour councillor and chair of Economic and Development Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I'm a transport consultant, author of Cutting Your Car Use and lead for 20's Plenty for York and national campaign manager. And I was also seriously injured cycling in 1992 in the city. I'm urgently calling for a 20-mile-an-hour limit for the York Station Gateway scheme. I believe that the scheme shifts most of the current Res Park to alternative locations, but will still leave 3 disabled bays and non-road cycle lane. There will be significant conflicting movements between the new cycle route, buses, taxis and short stay parking, where the current car park is located between the Railway Institute and the station. This must surely itself be a good reason for 20 miles an hour. Also, there will be a major flow of pedestrians across between the station and southbound bus stops alongside the city wall. The proposal has 1 major pedestrian crossing outside the portico, but removes the 2 currently in place, where no doubt many will still try to cross. 20 miles an hour will make it safer, 5 to 7 times safer in terms of fatality risks. There are significant numbers of road injuries on this stretch of road. I sent you the crash map. We both know that some will continue. By a reduction of road speeds, you'll be potentially avoiding some of those crashes, preventing injuries, and that those that still occur will be much less seriously life-altering. Plus 20 miles an hour is essential for the major gateway for sustainable travel for York. Otherwise, you can't expect to reach your traffic reduction targets set in the transport plan. The scheme is costing 25.73 million. 20 mile an hour signage and traffic regulation orders would form a tiny cost in the overall scheme and yet have very major cost effectiveness. Just the TRO and a few signs, probably under £10,000. Overall journey times are unlikely to be affected because of the nature of stop-go driving and bunching in central parts of cities. It will reduce acceleration, halve the noise, and there will be less pollution. Please include 20 miles an hour in the scheme. It's not only the right thing to do, it's actually nonsensical not to, given that it's best practice. It's a casualty black spot and the way we want our tourists to enter York. Other cities already have 20 miles an hour outside their stations, Edinburgh Waverley, Newcastle Central, London King's Cross, for instance. The danger of not doing this is that York will fall behind economically in terms of being attractive. 20 miles an hour is not an optional extra, it's essential. It's especially key to achieving your Vision Zero target of 0 killed or serious injuries, full system safety, a proposal in the draft transport strategy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for those comments, Anna, and it would be really helpful if you could submit those to the consultation that's going on around local transport strategy as well, so that they can be considered in that context as well as here today. So thank you. The next speaker we have on the list is Mrs. Virginia Ledley. Thank you. Would you like me to give you 30 seconds warning, or are you okay for 3 minutes?
I think I'm all right for 3
Okay,
minutes.
all right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Ginny Ledley and I live at number 16 with my husband Rob and daughter Georgina. We have lived on Queen Street for 34 years and have been strong advocates for city living until recently. From the outset of this project, the needs of the residents haven't been addressed. As far as I'm aware, there hasn't been an impact assessment done for the residents. Consequently, a road layout scheme has been designed which is not inclusive. It is exclusive. It caters for some stakeholders, but only at the detriment of other stakeholders. Queen Street has already lost 2 households. One with a registered disabled family member who moved when told that there was no guarantee that she'd be able to park close enough to her home to access it. Another whose health had deteriorated and who was concerned that carers wouldn't be able to park outside her home, in effect making it difficult for her to arrange care. In my own household, disability has become a recent concern, and if this TRO is enacted, we too will need to look at how we continue to live on Queen Street. The issues raised by residents simply haven't been addressed. Moving residents' parking to Toft Green is not an alternative if you can't walk there. Likewise, the NCP car park will be too far for some people. There is still no adequate provision for maintaining our homes, as there is no service bay for tradespeople, including those needed at short notice, who will always need access to their vans. It is right that CYC seeks to improve cycling infrastructure whenever it can, but equally, it is not right to do this at the expense of residents. Sorry, I've just scrolled a little bit too far there. At the expense of residents being able to continue living in their homes in the manner which they do at present. The removal of the bridge gives more space for the road layout, not less. There must therefore be a way of accommodating all who use this space now, even if the segregated cycle path has to begin where the houses end. If the traffic regulation order is enacted, it will put the desires of some stakeholders above the needs of other stakeholders, including those with disabilities. Surely this cannot be acceptable. I urge the committee to refuse this TRO and request that the designers go back to the drawing board and use the needs of the residents as the starting point and not the end point. Without their essential needs being met, the houses on Queen Street will no longer be suitable accommodation for permanent living. One other point I'd like to raise is point 5 in the pros and cons section of the decision report, which states that residents parking could result in residents carrying out unsafe manoeuvres, that is, crossing the carriageway to turn in the road to head towards Blossom Street. This too could be avoided by using the new loop road round by the Railway Institute. However, the very same manoeuvres are carried out by taxis and traffic exiting the Premier Inn. Why would it be unsafe for residents, but not for others? Bearing in mind that others that are crossing the carriageway are nearer Blossom Street Junction. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I'll take them into consideration when I make my decision. Thank you very much. Then we have Mr. Stuart Allen as well. Would you like to come to the desk, Mr. Allen?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Allen, you have 3 minutes. Would you like me to give you 30-second
No,
warning?
I'm fine.
You're okay.
I can
Okay.
kick off.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to allow me to speak today. I'm Stuart Allen. I live in Queen Street. The parking situation that's going to be removed is going to be detrimental to me, because when propose the new residence parking area is going to be on top green, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to walk round to there and drop my car, pick up my car. It's going to be difficult for me, full stop. When the bridge scheme was first muted, there was a lot of design work and everything that was online, and it showed that the residents had the residence parking bays. So I didn't refuse the fact that I wasn't against it, because we had residence parking. Then later on, it got changed, which I had no idea. Us as residents didn't know. We weren't informed that things had been changed. So I didn't object to it, but now I do object to it, because we can't have tradespeople coming to do work on our properties. My disability is only going to get worse, so I'm going to need to have carers at some point. So they need a place to come to help me out. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. I would like the council to please have a rethink and, you know, help people such as myself, and there's other people's needs as well. So basically, that's me. So,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Allen. Have you said everything you'd like to, or is there anything further you'd like to say? But thank you for doing that, because I know it's not an easy thing to do, and this table doesn't help either at all. Thank you for that. Thank you. And then our final speaker today is Mr. Mark Harris. So if you'd like to come to the table, Mr. Harris, thank you. So you have 3 minutes. Would you like me to give you a 30-second warning?
Yeah, give me a 30-second warning. Yeah,
Okay,
I can talk. So,
okay.
so first of all, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. So I also object to the changes in the planning. We've heard from plenty of other people today about why there are challenges for people with care, challenges for people for work on their properties, but in simple terms, from my point of view, what I also wanted to add was the fact that by removing these parking situations, delivery drivers, people from Amazon or takeaways, whatever, they're still going to stop on those roads. Now, what that actually means is an unplanned hazard is far more dangerous than a planned one. If you actually go back to the original plan that was drawn on there, and people have space where they can pull up, where they can stop, they can wait because there are parking bays available, all the cyclists know that, all the pedestrians know that, and so do all the other road users. If you have people randomly stopping, it is going to cause more of a hassle, or more of a hazard. Now, a lot of the properties on Queen Street are 2- and 3-bed houses, in fact, 3-bed family homes. So people with young children and small children are now expected, when they've done their weekly shop, to park on Toff Green, unload a pushchair, have 2 children under the age of 3, which is where I've been when I've lived in that property, and then walk somehow from Toff Green with a week's worth of shopping and 2 small children. At what point are they expected to potentially leave the children in their home or come back to the car and keep crossing a main major road with small children? It just seems ridiculous, and as other people have suggested, completely and utterly untenable. Then you've got the impact of the value of properties. You see, throughout the UK, there's an average of 13% put on included for on and off street parking. Removing that is having a financial detrimental effect to every householder in that street. And as we are currently planning with the York Central project to build 2,500 new homes, of I'm sure many are going to be family homes, I bet they have parking included, as well as the 1 million square foot of office and retail space that is also going to be created. We seem to have found a way to remove parking when it was still there. And by the way, it's still there on the council website today with images. I've actually found that today. It is still there showing people through video what it's going to look like when it's finished. That plan, there is, as Peter's already suggested, there is a way to make that work where I'm sure all of us can be happy. And that is all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perfect timing. I didn't need to interrupt you. So thank you for those considerations and the items that you've raised. When the officers tell us the information, the relevant information for the decision, I will ask them to cover those as well, so that we can all hear what the situation is around as much as possible. So we have the papers that accompany this decision-making session, and now what will happen is that the transport officers sat with me here. So we have James Gilchrist, Michael Howard and Brendan Murphy, who will both introduce information and answer any questions that I have. So please go ahead.
Okay. So I'll present, and then Michael, who represents the regulatory side of highways and transport, and Brendan, who's been project managing and working with the residents, can answer any questions you may have. So I think if we go right to the beginning, one of the main aspirations of the station frontage project is about making the station more accessible, especially for active travel modes, encouraging more people to cycle, such as children, more people to use the bus and making those more attractive. And that's in accordance with our adopted local transport plan, which places walking, cycling at the top of the hierarchy, and then followed by buses, and then cars at the bottom of that transport hierarchy. So as part of the original scheme design, we developed a segregated cycle route as part of that design. The plan did aim to keep every use there if possible, so our aspiration was absolutely to maintain residents parking if at all possible. And we would therefore worked with cyclists and residents to explore how that layout should work in terms of where the parking went, where the cycling went, and a preferred solution was developed in response to that engagement. But the preferred solution went to a safety audit, and that concluded that we should remove the parking because there was conflict between the segregated cycle route and the residents' parking. So on that basis, we therefore explored all the other options which we previously discussed to see if any of those would pass the safety audit. And the recommendation from all the audits was that we should remove the residents' parking. There's just not space for everything we want to achieve in that section of the highway. So therefore, in accordance with the transport policies and the hierarchy that I've mentioned, we prioritised the cycling provision, and that went to planning committee back in 2021, and the planning committee gave consent to the scheme on the basis residents' parking would be removed. In order to deliver that scheme, we need to go through the statutory process of changing the traffic regulation order, which we've obviously advertised, and this meeting is considering the responses to that advert today. Obviously, this isn't an easy decision. There's just not room for everything, and that's part of the challenge that faces us. As I've mentioned, the policy context that guides officers and yourself is that walking and then cycling is prioritised over buses and then that over cars. Residents' parking schemes don't guarantee parking outside your house. They provide parking within a zone. They don't, a residents' parking scheme doesn't guarantee you that parking outside your house. In terms of some of the questions, there will be double yellow lines along that section of the road. Delivery drivers can stop for 10 minutes for deliveries, etc. And actually anyone who parks on a double yellow line, there is normally a 10-minute observation period before any ticket is given. You will be able to load and unload, except at the busiest times on double yellow lines, and that's common practice elsewhere. So you will be able to load and unload, except at peak times. And people who have a blue badge can park on double yellow lines for 3 hours. So I appreciate those aren't ideal, but I think it's important to be clear about what is proposed by the traffic regulation order. In addition, tradespeople can get special permits and arrangements can be made for emergency works as well. And we obviously do that where there are properties that have double yellow lines or restricted access in front of them. In the same way, we offer a free permit to carers so that they can park within zones if they need to access residents to provide care. What we have recognised, and the project team have recognised, is that there is a more significant impact on residents during the period of construction. And therefore, the proposal is that the construction project will fund resident parking within the NCP during that construction period. I think that probably covers most of the questions, but I'll turn to Michael and Brendan to see if there's anything they want to add.
No, I think we picked up on most of the points there. Obviously, sorry, James. Sorry, I think we picked up on most of the points there. Clearly, there are a number of special permits available within any resident parking area, covering trade access and also the provision of skips should there be required, which can be applied for by a resident or the tradesperson to gain access. Clearly, we've been looking to maintain that balance between road safety and ensure that all stakeholders are provided with adequate and safe access around the city.
Thank you. Could you just clarify for me on the tradesperson vehicles, etc.? So how would that work, and skips as well? What's the access for those?
So it's exactly the same right across the city, whether there's a residence permit area. Permits for tradespeople are available outside of loading hours, but they're not permitted to place a permanent skip in the footway or cycle path within that licensing. Residents can request a skip contractor to apply for a temporary skip license, where skips can be placed on the highway temporarily on the subject during off-peak hours. Similarly, residents can also apply for scaffolding licenses. And in this case now, for this location where parking restrictions may apply, this would allow homeowners to undertake renovations or improvements.
Just, sorry, Councillor Douglas, just to be clear, the loading ban is between 8 and 9:15 in the morning and 4 and 6 p.m. in the afternoon. So in reality, if a resident needed a skip for a renovation, that could arrive at 9:15. It would have to be gone by 4 o'clock. But the skip companies are used to working and builders are used to working with that. It would be far from a unique situation in the city.
Okay, thank you for that. And can you outline to me as well blue badge parking on double yellow lines, given that there is a loading ban in place as well at
So,
certain times
again,
of the day?
Outside those hours that I've just mentioned, blue badge holders will be able to park for up to 3 hours on double yellow lines. So that, you could park from 9:15 to 12:15 as a blue badge holder on double yellow lines. And that happens in the city at the moment, happens on Duncan Place, and it historically has happened in the city centre and will be doing again very soon.
Thank you. And then can you outline to me what the arrangements are for parking in Toft Green? I've read that there's special arrangements for Queen Street residents. Could you give me some detail, please?
Yes, so essentially, with the removal of 8 spaces in front of the Queen Street residents, they will be replaced on Toft Green just outside the hotel, where there's currently like pay and display. They'll be converted to 8 spaces to add into the R15 SC zone.
Okay, so the basis is that the zone will be increased, the parking availability within that residents' parking zone will be increased on Toft Green to accommodate the loss elsewhere.
8 spaces, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then am I right that there was a scheme some time ago now that did have both parking and the cycle lane in place? Can you give me a bit of information as to the history of that change there, please?
Yes, so the brief for the project at the outset to the consultant, our designer, was to maintain what is there now, the sort of quantum of what is there now in the future. So that applied to the station car park. It applied to like the taxi rank, and it also applied. The brief was to maintain residents' parking. So in the first, and I think it's shown in Annex 1 there, the first draft of the scheme, if you like, that went to the first round of planning consultation showed both. It was at that point, through that planning consultation, that the conflict arose, if you like, between the residents' parking and the cycle campaign, who felt there was a safety issue there. It was at that point, as my colleague James sort of pointed out, that's when it was taken to review, and the review, independent safety reviewers were asked to look at 3 options. One was the parking shown on the near side of the vehicle, the off side of the vehicle, and then to consider no parking at all. So our designers provided like sort of 3 designs, if you like, for the reviewers to review, and the conclusion of that was that the safest thing was to remove the parking altogether. That sort of then went to more data was prepared. Then that was then reviewed by the executive member at the time, and the decision was taken pre the following planning submission to submit without the parking there at all. And as James said, the planning at that planning committee, the consent was given to the scheme without parking.
Okay, thank you. And then just finally, for my clarification on carers who might need to access the homes. So am I right that they can apply for a free permit that allows them to park in any of the res park zones in the city? Can you just make sure that I've got this
Yes, so
correct as well,
carers may
please?
be entitled to a free attendance parking permit, which enables a carer to park near a property if the person they're caring for lives in a house or flat within a resident parking scheme. Residents need substantial and regular carer to require attendance allowance. And if this is the case, then parking restriction, this is the same case that applies across the city, whether we've got residents parking areas. As I say, in that case, a carer's parking permit can be requested.
Okay, and so I assume that they would also have the ability to load and unload as well.
Obviously, there is the double yellow lines and the loading restrictions at peak hours as outlined by James. But yes, they would have the same allowed to park for a 10-minute grace period if they need to unload or load close to the property.
Okay, thank you. Actually, before I move on, is there anything else that you particularly would like to tell me that we haven't already covered?
I think we've covered everything that we've set out the policy context. I think we've answered the questions raised by the public speakers and the residents. I think, as I say, this is challenging. I think the only thing we haven't necessarily covered is the 20-mile-an-hour point that was being made. That is something that we can go away and look at as the scheme develops, but obviously that can be done as part of the scheme, or we review speed limits all the time, so that could be added into the ongoing review process.
Yes, I think it does need to be considered, and but then I'm also mindful that we've got our local transport strategy ongoing at the moment, and my view is that should be considered in the round as part of that, and I know that Councillor Kilbane would think that that is the way that should be handled as well. Yes, of course, go ahead.
Just wanted to add just that we are aware that obviously there's extra issues related to parking while the construction works of the bridge are going on. So we have looked to mitigate that by securing parking within the NEC car park for single permits for those residents that have a vehicle and have a permit within that zone.
Okay, thank you. So obviously this is a tremendously difficult decision to make. There are numerous competing interests and people that need to be taken into consideration. I have been asked within the papers on page 3 to approve option 3A, which is the amendment to the traffic regulation order as advertised, which is Annex J of the papers. That's the revocation of residents' priority parking bays on Queen Street for use by R15 SC permit holders, and the introduction of residents' priority parking bays on Toft Green for use by R15 SC permit holders, as shown on the plan shown in Annex G. And also B is approve alternative private parking in neighbouring NCP car park for all resident car owners to mitigate loss of residents parking, particularly for blue badge holders during scheme construction. Now, my understanding is that mitigation parking is suggested for a period of 9 months. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. My feeling is that if we're going to offer mitigation parking, it should allow for a 12-month period so that people have the opportunity to be assured that during construction that it will cover the full period, and we may well need to review that if construction goes further than expected. So I'd like to request that we keep that under review. But I think 12 months should be a starting point if we can agree to that.
Yeah, I think what we will do is we'll add for a minimum of 12 months under recommendation B when we make the decision. you're comfortable with that.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yes, and I very much am aware of the issues that you've raised, residents, and this is very difficult. But I do think that we need to move ahead with the recommendations as outlined and with the mitigations that have been offered. And I also think that it would be helpful for all residents affected if they could have a letter that outlines what is possible or not within the area that's going to be in front of their houses as far as deliveries, loading, the loading bay, exclusion period, you know, the issues that we've spoken about today, so that everybody knows exactly what is and isn't possible. Because I think in order to mitigate for the circumstances that you find yourselves in, you're going to need to use those mitigations to the full extent. But yeah, my decision is to go with option 3A for safety reasons, but within the understanding that the mitigations need to be put in place. So thank you for everybody for coming along today and participating, and you will hear from the council with information to help you deal with the situation that you're going to find yourselves in. So thank you, everybody.
Councillor Douglas, I have a question. Is there any appeals process?
I would need to double check. What I'll do is I'll put that into the letter where we explain the process. I don't think there is for a traffic regulation order, but I will double check with the lawyers and outline the process so that if there is a way to appeal that decision. Ultimately, the option may be judicial review, which obviously you can review any decision with, but that would be something you'd need to take your own legal advice on, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me one moment. The public, I'm sorry to be a stickler for this. I think this is what Robert's going to tell me, that the public are able to participate in public participation and speak then, and unfortunately not following that. But if you do want to communicate with us about this decision, then please do email me. You can find my email address on the website, and we will take your requests and forward whatever those may be. Robert, is that what you were going to tell me?
That is, yeah, just in terms of following the agenda.
Yes. So I'm just going to finish off the agenda then. So we've covered item 4. Item 5 is urgent business, and there is no urgent business. So at that point, I bring the meeting to a close.